Okay, so this video is for you if you are off to college for the first time or going back to college and you're also in eating disorder recovery. I have four really quick tips to share with you. So quick and dirty, I'm going back to college. It's really important to prepare yourself accordingly because college just is known in the research to be such a high stress time and one of the biggest times of likelihood that an eating disorder will develop if it wasn't already there. There are so many reasons for that. Just things related to it being such a high stress time of life in general, a time when there's so many changes happening, a time when there might be a lot of body comparison that's available for people. So it's understandable that it's a time of increased risk. And I think it's just important to validate that for yourself and to kind of know that going into it. And then to game plan, of course. So number one tip is to prepare ahead of time. So that might look like calling your college dining hall and asking, like, what are the different meal packages? What does the food environment look like? Like, what are the options for switching things out? And also asking questions like, things that you might not think of to ask, but could be important, like, are calories listed under every dish name in the dining hall? Because a lot of colleges do have that nowadays. And for a lot of people, that can be really triggering, just seeing this big caloric number next to every option. So while there's not much that can be done about that, unfortunately, preparing yourself ahead of time and even like talking with a therapist ahead of time about like, what's my game plan? How can I cope with this like repeated trigger that I'll be exposed to every day can be really helpful. So just preparing yourself across the board, calling the counseling center to ask what their intake process is like, ask about different groups available, just really familiarizing yourself with the landscape of the place that you're going to be living at. Number two is gather support. So whether that looks like looking into groups that are on campus that are really like mental health focused or even specific to eating disorder recovery. Like I know Project Heal has a lot of groups on different campuses that are free to students, and you'd be surrounded by hopefully kind of like-minded individuals, or at least people who understand the struggle of eating disorder recovery, or even a group like Active Minds. There's Active Minds across the country on different campuses. That could be really great to join. And then gathering support could also just look like ahead of time arranging phone calls with your friends from other universities and colleges and just saying like, on Friday nights, let's have like a FaceTime. Let's make sure we're touching base and I have kind of support lined up for the semester. Perhaps that means if you have a good relationship with your family and it's accessible, arranging family visits. But just kind of like gathering support, rallying the troops and getting ready for this big life change. Reflecting, I think this is really helpful if you're going back to college and you potentially had like a relapse or a really hard time in your recovery, or maybe that's where your eating disorder started and now you're going back. Reflecting like what kind of environmental triggers led into it, what played a role, what might I feel like in my body and just psychologically when I go back, and how can I work to change the narrative of this place and this environment and potentially take back the narrative to some extent. So really taking some time to reflect, which can be helpful to have a therapist involved when you're doing that as well. And then lastly, this is probably my biggest tip, is have a team in place at your college. So if you're somebody who is in eating disorder recovery and was working with somebody else over the summer and then they can't see you at school because you'll be in a different state or something like that, ahead of time, if you can, finding a team. So finding a therapist there, asking your current therapist for help locating someone. It is a lot easier these days with so much telehealth happening. You just really need to find someone in the state who specializes in eating disorders. So trying to have that established before your feet are on the ground there is really great. And a dietitian as well, potentially, if that's part of your treatment. Yeah, and some counseling centers do have therapists available who work with folks with eating disorders. So also call and ask, like, Is there a therapist that I can see? Definitely call ahead of time because wait lists start so quickly at the counseling centers. But asking, is there a therapist? How often am I allowed to see the therapist? Or are there groups? Because those should be free resources that are available to you. So yes, those are my 4 major tips. Good luck to anybody going off to college right now. You got this. We're cheering you on.